Hello, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me on another of my wonderful interviews. Today, I'm delving into the world of politics, but not politics. How can that be, you say? Well, I'm going to be talking to a gentleman who is going to be running, as it were, for in the race to get into government, but is completely different. He's almost not a politician. What am I talking about? Let's get into this. I'd like to introduce Neil O'Neill, who is the founder of Nonpol.com. We'll find out exactly what that is. And he's just told me he is a certified ethical hacker. So if that hasn't roused your interest, I don't know what will. Neil, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on board.
Richard, hi, great to be here, and thank you for that lovely introduction.
Well, I'd love to know what a certified ethical hacker is, just to begin with, because that sounds it sounds on the good side of doing something which ordinarily we would think of as being bad.
That's correct. So, my job is to work for financial institutions to find the weaknesses where hackers get in and steal all our data and financial information so that I can help them block against the hackers. It's a bit like a locksmith. He puts locks in to stop the burglars, but he has the skill, if he wanted to become a burglar. But then he wouldn't be ethical.
Right. Yes. So you can test the system. It's like the inner tube going into the water to see if there's
Any
a
bubbles?
leak.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant stuff.
Yeah.
So you are the founder of Nonpol, which people can find nonpol.com, and I do have the website here. Let me just bring that up so that we can see what I'm talking about. Here it is. This is your website, and it says on it the first UK non-political party, and yet it's a political party. I
Yes.
suppose it's introducing a whole new political concept of up politics. Well, there'll be a lot of people who will certainly on your side for that. Could you perhaps tell us what it is then?
Okay, well, hopefully it does what it says on the tin. We're non-political. I think everybody is disillusioned with politics today and politicians.
Yes.
And even though there are probably some very good politicians out there, the system makes it very difficult for them not to be sucked into a corrupt or difficult environment. It takes a lot of time and money to get elected, and they get sponsors and promoters. And then when they're in power, they owe favors. And like it or not, people can pull their strings. And that's what we call politics with a capital P. Whereas politics with a small p, we call the science of governing for the people. Politics with a big P is people who use their political power, their influence for their own uh, end means. So we want to be totally non-political, but we have to get into the system. It's a political system to be able to make a change and try and bring in new rules.
Right. Okay. So it the first question, I suppose, is there's a lot of potential parties who are trying to run to get in to power, and I guess there's the whole difficulty of getting in past the two parties that are already there. Although, of course, they both seem to be, as somebody has described them, two cheeks from the same arse, as it were. So, if
I
I can
love
put it like
it.
put it
I'll,
like that.
I'll become their crack.
Well, that's it. We need a crack. So people, I think, are looking elsewhere. As people are
Yes.
thinking, hang on, we've given these two parties a lot of chance over the last 50, 60 years, and they continually offer the same solutions and never deliver anything, because we always seem to be in the same point when it comes to a general election. What makes you then different to some of these other parties like Reform and the Greens and so on? And when you're in power,
Thank you.
how will you resist the, let's say, those unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats that meet, say, in places like Davos, who seem to have an enormous amount of power over governments all around the world?
I totally agree. There is too much political global pressure on the world. And I think COVID let these people realize there are tools that can control what we say and do. And we, obviously, being non-political, we can step outside of this. We don't have to conform to the ideologies of each of these parties. And a lot of these parties have very strict ideologies. In the States, you've got the Democrats and Republicans, and it really has polarized the country. It's either us or them. There's very little, well, in the States, there's virtually nothing in between. And the UK for a long time has been very similar with the Tories and the Labour. And the the the, the Labour obviously are seen as socialists, and we know that they work with the unions, whereas the Tories would never work with the unions, and they tend to get the elite or the rich to support them. So they've all got these little boxes that they work with, and you couldn't have the Tories go and sidle up to the unions, and you couldn't have Labour paying bonuses to the elite. So they're very restricted in their little boxes. And at Nonpol, because we're non-political, we don't have a box. We don't have an ideology. And this is our concept that you alluded to on our homepage of politics. Politics generally is a linear spectrum, going from extreme left wing over to extreme right, with the liberals and the in-betweens in the middle. That's very, very linear. Now, we are not locked into that spectrum. We are above it, we're up. So those spectrums can all, the cream rises to the top, we like to say, because each party has some very good ideas. They also have very bad ideas. So because we have no political allegiance, we can choose the good ideas from each party wherever on the spectrum. That's a good idea. That works, whether it's in the UK, whether it's in Switzerland, whether it's in the US. If it's a good idea, we don't care who thought of it or what ideology was behind it. We push it up into upper politics. And in addition to that, we bring down our good ideas. And then in the middle of our politics, we've got a neutral, unbiased set of principles that really fall on common sense. Most people say, that's a good idea, or that makes sense. If it doesn't, if 70% of the electorate didn't think our idea was good, then it's probably not a good idea. So we use common sense, we use good ideas from all political people on the spectrum, and we introduce new, radical but not extreme ideas to try and approach politics.
So, how would you counter what we see, the rules and the regulations that Parliament has as it currently stands? And it seems to have a lot of rules and regulations which make it difficult for actually a government to do what it wants to do. And then the civil service, who also seems to have their own particular biases in the way that they operate and carry out the duties that the ministers want to happen.
Yes, and I think some of our rules are very archaic. I mean, if I was in power, the first thing I would get rid of would be Prime Minister's question time. We look around the world like buffoons, and it's like a bunch of kids just shouting and bellowing at each other, and it's embarrassing. Now, we shouldn't have to wait an hour every week to ask the Prime Minister questions, and he already knows the questions in advance, so he's got his glib answers. It's a dreadful environment, and I just see it as politician bashing. If we've got questions, we should have them at any time. So we would open a portal where anybody, both politicians on the opposition, anyone can ask questions of the government. And we would publish the question and we'd publish a proper answer and there will be a record. And over time, people can see how we've dealt with questions. So get rid of this stupid 1 hour slagging match and do it properly. But these are the traditions and the customs that we have. I mean, I'm very much for the British culture and a lot of the things we do, but we should keep the good things that we're good at and get rid of the excess rubbish. The other thing is, a lot of these parties, because they're so political, if one of their MPs says something that's just a little bit on the edge or against the narrative of either the party or the media or Davos or some pharmaceutical or some major corporate, like Andrew Bridgen was doing with the COVID, that party will then sanction them. Well, our party, we'd have control of our people, and we'd make sure they had as much freedom as long as they were not saying something that was illegal. People should be able to be honest. And one of the things I would bring in, because we'd like to bring in a British constitution, a bit like the American, is free speech. And we have to have the right to disagree. If I don't like what somebody's doing or saying, I should be able to say that. That should be everybody's fundamental right. Now, I have the right to be an idiot, and I have the right to say stupid things. And if they are stupid, other people will quickly say, well, that didn't make much sense. I don't need to listen to that guy. Or they would come back with an argument to say why I was stupid. So again, in Nonpol, we really do want to fight for free speech to give a balance to the argument, because we've seen wokeism really destroy people talking against the narrative. And I think that is now in the political world, it's in the mainstream media world, and it is actually really, really dividing the country. We have a lot of unrest.
So, I mean, one of the problems it does seem to me that as laudable as any party coming in, firstly, they do seem to change tack once they're in power. That's one thing that, so, there's that business about, well, how do we believe you? But there is, as I said before, that you've got these systems in place, their rules and regulations, which does seem to be very difficult to change. And how easy would it be for any new party who's been elected as the Prime Minister and your cabinet to change what has inherently been there for a century or so, enable you to carry out completely the wishes that you want?
Well, obviously, you can't just walk in and change the rules overnight. They're there for a reason. A lot of them have worked very well. And we wouldn't do that. We have to keep the lights on. So the civil service, the national health, all our ambulances, fire, military, police, they're all very valuable, useful services that do work well generally. So we're not looking to change all that. We're looking to come in, look at the things that work well, and then organically, over time, see where we can improve, see where we can adjust, see where we can reduce the bureaucracy, see where we can try different ideas. There's no way anybody in any government can come in and just suddenly change things overnight unless you're a dictator. And that's not what we're interested in. We want to see what's working well now. I mean, personally, I think the National Health Service is an incredible institution. I think we should be proud worldwide. But a lot of people have problems with it. If you're in a bad area and you can't get to see a doctor, but I've never had a problem. I mean, patient access, the way we use technology to make it so much better to organise appointments and new records, we're continually improving. So I would want to continue with that. It's the areas that we're struggling with, but bit by bit, you have to change. And you can't do it overnight. And you need the civil service and all the ministers to keep things running. And you need to understand how and why. There's a lot of things I think the public don't know on why it's done. There's obviously security, national interest, and there's other reasons behind closed doors that we all don't hear about. And we'd have to listen to that and understand the rationale of why things are where they are. But we would look to tweak and change, and certainly not accept the approach, well, it's always been like that, so that's the way it is. We would challenge, why is it like that? Where can it change? Where can it improve? And in many cases, it might be, well, actually, it's working pretty well at the moment. Let's move on to the area that isn't working so well.
Right, and it seems to me that there's, and the people will probably, I would imagine, agree that there are plenty of things that are just not working very well, namely the MPs just ignoring complaints and concerns that people have, and fobbing people off without reporting back up the chain, or even if they did, they know that the response is going to be the same. You mentioned the NHS. At the moment, we have a situation, and it's very difficult to talk about this on this platform that I'm on, because
I'll keep my words we talk.
certain terms and conditions make it difficult to explore, say, alternative health ideas. But at the moment, the NHS, it seems to be it fall into one very big camp that is governed very much and firmly by big pharma, the pharmaceutical companies. And if anybody goes against those ideas, then they're out or considered to be misinformation and misguided, and it's no place for it. How would you develop the NHS? Because we've seen in recent times that mandates have come in where consent for a particular medical intervention has been very much forced on people, pressured on people by a central government, and probably globally on all central governments. And people are only now realizing that perhaps what they took was not necessary. How would you cope with a situation like that? What would be your approach?
Okay, I think your key point there, I totally agree with you, and that's this new cancel culture. And during the pandemic, I followed Dr. John Campbell and his advice. And I, myself, personally, I think I'm here today because of John Campbell, and I think many thousands of people are. But he wasn't allowed on mainstream media. BBC wouldn't report on him. Nobody in the UK would give him a listen. He's done reports on many European programs. He's got over 1 million followers, and he gave fantastic advice because he was being honest, and he was 40 years in the NHS. So
Didn't he has changed his mind though, hasn't he, about a certain intervention which he was advising people to take, but now he wouldn't.
totally, he said he was misled. He said if I'd have known all the information I knew today, I wouldn't have been vaccinated. That was his choice. That's what he said. He was just again following the narrative, and he was following people like Chris Whitty, who was the medical advisor on the government. And Chris Whitty obviously got a lot of his information from pharmaceuticals. He's been in that industry a long time. He's been funded by pharmaceutical companies and Bill Gates and so on. So he has his view, and politicians aren't medical people, so they listen to them. And they've also got a big out there, oh, we're only following medical advice, so you can't blame us.
Mm. But
So
what would you do? You're prime minister now, and suddenly the WHO, who may well have at this point signed sovereignty away, so that they can mandate certain medical advice, which would no longer be advice; it would be indoctrination, wouldn't it? It would be practice. This is now medical procedure. You're prime minister, and they're telling us one thing. Many people say, actually, do you know what? My immune system's all right. Thanks very much. I'd rather just eat healthily, drink healthily, blah, blah, blah. I don't want a big pharma test drug. What would you do?
okay, you bring us some fantastic points there. The very first thing I'd do on day one would be pull out of WHO. And I'd probably pull out of every global organization. United Nations, WEF, NATO is something you would have to, that's a strategic rather than global. So yes, WHO, the powers they're looking for are obscene, and I think people on the street need to know that we cannot have a global organization that have made huge mistakes and responsible for the deaths of millions of people having a mandate over our country and our people. So that is the first thing. Now, it's interesting you'd say, what would I do NHS and health-wise? We've released on the Nonpol website a detailed manifesto on our health program and what we would do. And one of the key things we would do, we would actually buy a pharmaceutical company, and we'd get all the drugs white label. Because if you go in to a pharmacy at the moment and you want to buy some antihistamines, if they've got a brand on them, it'll be £7 a pop. If you take the white label, it'll be 89 pence. There's a lot of profit in there. So if we had a pharmaceutical company, we'd have everything white label, and it would have the NHS brand, which we could then sell around the world. We'd also have the facilities to do the proper testing of vaccines, to do it all above board, to get involved so that we know it rather than be told by the pharmaceuticals. The money they've made off the vaccines has been obscene, and there's a lot of information, and we can't go into the details, about the failings of it. And it's been shown categorically that natural immunity is far better than a vaccine. And at the moment, the Omicron variant and the recent BA 2.86 variant are very mild, no worse than a cold. And a healthy person, as you say, good health. We should be caring more about the obesity epidemic because obesity and COVID is a bad combination. So, yeah, if you're healthy and if you're young, you should be able to withstand the COVID current variant. In fact, I think the figures are um, the average age of people who died of COVID is 83 years old. Well, they're vulnerable people anyway. And I think the majority of people in the ICUs during COVID were deficient in vitamin D. And if we'd all just topped up our vitamin D, the amount of lives that we would save would have been spectacular. But unfortunately, there's no money in vitamins. So that isn't the narrative they want to have. And one thing I will bring up, because a lot of people probably aren't aware of this in the UK, the vaccine was brought out under emergency measures. And in the States, there is a law that says if there is no known medicine that can withstand the disease or the situation, you can bring out an emergency vaccine. Now we know and we've seen, and the data and the studies are now in, that ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, and monoclonal antibodies help. I'm not saying they cure it, but they do help with it. But if that was accepted, they wouldn't be able to issue the emergency vaccine. So I think there's a lot of information that's been held back from us. And I think the people are now starting to learn this, and this is causing a lot of upset and unrest. So if I was Prime Minister, I would try my hardest to be open kimono and tell everything. The pharmaceuticals play a very important role in our society, but medicine has added our life expectancy 20, 30 years. So we do need them. They're very important, but they're becoming too powerful. We should use them, not them use us. So I would try and work with them. I'd get my own pharmaceutical company so I could help deliver the message and the medicines to the NHS, but work with them, not be controlled by them.
Right. Okay. Another big area that I think people are now seeing rolled out, which they've not asked for, is this green agenda and particularly the net zero. So before we get into that, what is your opinion on, or what would be Nonpol's opinion or stance on the whole man-made global warming issue?
Okay, now this is a very difficult one. First, I think net zero is unattainable. Secondly, the UK globally impact on climate change is in the small percentages. So we could turn every car and factory off tomorrow, and the impact globally would be minimal. The fact that China are commissioning new coal-powered reactors shows that we cannot control them. So as a globe, I believe personally that climate change cannot be stopped. We may have already gone past the point of no return. We do not know. There are so many arguments of people saying this is the issue, and they're saying, well, no, that's we've only gone at 1% in the last 150 years. You can argue all day. It's all noise, and you get experts on both sides putting valid arguments. And what we get is nowhere effectively.
So just to be clear,
Mhm.
what would does non-poll say that there is a problem of man-made global warming and that we are warming and heading to a catastrophe, or do you have a different viewpoint to that?
We have slightly different. We can't ignore the fact that weather is changing at the moment. We also can't ignore the fact that a lot of these things are natural. The Icelandic volcano, when that went up for 2 or 3 weeks, it polluted the atmosphere with greenhouse gases more than 10 years of cars on the road. There can be a load of volcanoes happen any day, especially with earthquakes. There's more chance of volcanoes. Yellowstone Park could go up and create more global warming than we can challenge. Yes, it's obvious since the Industrial Revolution we've added to the whole situation. But what I'm seeing is that the Western economy are investing trillions and trillions into trying to fix global warming without any certainty that they can do that. And that is killing our economies, killing our way of life, and it's killing the industrial advancement that we have. Whereas you've got your Chinas who'll just sit back and watch us disseminate our economy, carry on creating all the global warming, and then when we haven't fixed it, they're the strongest economy in the world. And it's, I think China or India are the two big risks to global warming. So the non-pol approach is, we think, let's assume that global warming is going to happen. What would we do?
Over what period of time?
The next 50 years.
Right.
Let's assume within 50 years it's gone. It may have gone past the point of no return now, but let's assume that because of China, India, and other natural situations, we can't stop it. We've got 50 years to do something about it. So if we assumed global warming is going to happen, our approach is, let's do a risk assessment. And I'd suggest every country in the world do a risk assessment. If global warming happens, what's the biggest risk to your country, your population, and your economy? Now, fortunately, we're an island. So our risk assessment is probably rising sea levels, and things coming out from the Atlantic, and the heat from the sun, from temperatures. And we should be able to look at that and come up with a plan. Okay, assume that's going to happen. Instead of investing in trying to stop it, let's invest in dealing with it. And then if we're wrong and there isn't global warming, we've lost nothing except the money.
Right. So what would you do? I mean, what would you do then? I mean, it seems that the government, the global government, to give it a title, that seems to have assumed control, and no one's pushed back against it, has decided that we must head towards a net zero carbon for one thing, get everything onto electricity, have these power generating sources they call renewables, which seems to me, and it's only my opinion, that they are not actually able to create enough power and energy in and of themselves, and are not even green to begin with, such as the wind farms and the solar panels. So what would you do that is different then, if you're trying to prevent us from getting to a point of no return and dealing?
I'm not trying to prevent us getting to the point of no return, because
Right.
I don't know where it is. I don't know if anybody knows where it is. I'm very much into renewals, not for climate change, but for efficiency. Let's use the free power of the globe, of nature. So wind, water, I think we should be doing that anyway, regardless of climate change. In fact, you probably don't know this, but I have a patent on a green energy item, and I was on Dragon's Den with it. And what it is, it's effectively putting a horizontal turbine under the ridge tile on your roof. And if you put one under each ridge tile, you have an array of turbines. So it doesn't look bad, it's not environmental, doesn't affect birds. More importantly, if the wind is too high, which we're getting with our bad weather, it doesn't have a cutout speed. At the moment, the turbines we have out in the fields and out at sea, if the wind is too fast, they have to change the shape because they'll be ripped off their housings. Whereas mine is under a ridge, so we could take any wind. And the beauty is there's a concept called the Venturi effect, where as the wind goes up a roof, and the roof acts like a sail on a boat, it comes to a small aperture underneath the ridge tile, and it sucks it through and increases the acceleration and brings it out to the other side, and that spins the turbine, creating electricity. So every house could almost be self-sufficient together with solar panels. And I've also got some ideas on rain. So
I
I'm
have to. I do have to ask this one question though,
yes,
because we've seen how Parliament, how politicians can fund themselves very nicely. If you were Prime Minister and you came up with your patented idea, would that be rolled out, and would you be personally making a lot of money from it? You can see why I've got to ask
yeah,
that
of course.
question.
I would do an Elon Musk and I would donate it to the country.
Okay.
Money isn't important to me. I've had a great life. I'm happy with my life. I don't need 10 million or 1 million because it can't buy happiness or it can't buy peace of mind.
So, what's your policy then in terms of gas and alternatives like wood burning stoves, diesel, and so on?
Well, obviously wood burning, and again, this is a very interesting thing. People moan about coal being a fossil fuel. Well, if we hadn't have found coal, we'd have burnt all the trees, and we'd have killed the lungs of the planet. So coal was a great interim step from burning wood, burning coal. I believe the future is nuclear. I think fusion reactors, where their output is effectively water, is the way forward. So I'd go for that from an efficiency perspective. Wind, water, rain, sea. There's many different ways. The underheating technologies. I think we should use those anyway.
And so,
Um,
are people safe with their wood burning stoves and their gas boilers?
I don't like wood burning stoves because actually the particulates that they create in your living room will get on your chest and cause other problems. So I think they're a health issue. I think because we're burning wood, if everybody did that, we'd be cutting more trees down. And I think trees are very important for the planet. So
But people aren't doing that, though, are they? I mean, people have got the option if they wanted to, and they're not.
yeah. So again, that's a difficult one. These kind of things, I don't have enough knowledge on the particulates. I actually pollution is something I do care about. Like climate change, plastics, I think is a big problem. So I do care about pollution. We do
I
need to
suppose Right. I suppose what I'm asking is choice. Would the public have the choice to be free to choose to have a wood burning stove or a thing under your tiles, a little wind farm under your tiles?
the thing under my tiles is called the power ridge. But anyway, I think
Right.
yes, people have to have choice. And yes, if they want to burn wood, I think they should. And I don't think we should block it. We certainly wouldn't say you can't do that. But what we
Right.
do, and this is the whole approach to the non-pol ethics or ethos, is we think there's a good way and a bad way to do everything. We actually think there's a good way to do immigration. Obviously, currently there's a very bad way. There's a good way to create heat and keep people warm. And we'd incentivize people to go for the better ways, the more efficient ways. But if they didn't like that and they wanted to have their little gas stove, that'd be fine. But the incentives would mean that the majority of people would see sense because if I could give you a better solution that was cheaper, healthier, and more efficient, you're likely to go to that rather than having the nice little wood fire or even a coal fire if you wanted your coal fire still. That is your choice. We would look to get the majority of people to have the clean, efficient, and cheap version.
Right. Okay. So you mentioned immigration there. Let's move on to that issue. I mean, we may as well go through these thorny issues because if people are
Yes,
going to
yes.
vote for a party who is saying they're non-political, these are highly political
Correct.
issues that are worrying people. So we see immigration at the moment, particularly the illegal immigration. I think people coming in on the boats, let's say. That might be the smallest version, really, but it's the most visual and it is worrying. And we've seen colossal numbers of people coming into this country. Now, there is a book, and I can never remember the sodding title of this book, but it's something. It's a French book, and the premise of the French book is that one day on the southern shores of France, 3 or 4 ocean liners turned up full with sub-Saharan Africans on board, about 3 or 4 thousand on each of these ships, and they kept coming, and immigration just kept coming, but it was there in one go. And as I read part of the book, it became too difficult for me to read it in the end, but I skipped to the end. And in the end, you had on the shore people with guns basically shooting them. They didn't want to shoot them, but they didn't want people coming in vast numbers. It became no choice. I mean, these people weren't armed, but by their sheer number, they were a threat. Now, people don't look at it like that because people are coming in over the last 5 years in ever greater numbers. But if all these people did come in one day, you would see in the effect of what this is. You'd get a much bigger idea of what was happening. What would you do? How do you stop this increasing invasion, as it has been described, of people from a different culture who have different traditions and ideas about how you live, coming into a Western country that has been established for at least the last 1,000 years and has tried to work out the best way to do things, what would you do?
Okay, there's a lot of points you've thrown at me there, and I'd like to pick them apart bit by bit.
Of course.
I think threat is a very, very big thing, and I'll give you an example. When the Syrian refugees went into Germany, I think Angela, whatever her name was, Prime Minister at the time, allowed 1 million immigrants because she had a pension crisis and she needed them to work to pay for her pension scheme. But what you have to remember, those people, the Syrian people, a lot of them, their footprint, let's get back to the carbon footprint, their footprint in Syria was very, very small. When you move into Germany, their carbon footprint changes hugely. So you're bringing in very low carbon footprint people to a huge, that's threatening the carbon footprint of Germany. Secondly, a lot of these people were illiterate in their own language. So how on earth are they going to cope with a foreign language? They also have their own culture, which Germany doesn't generally have. So you've got a major, major issue with people that don't fit. I would have actually gone to a similar place like Saudi Arabia and get where the culture, the environment, everything is fairly similar, and help with that government to see if we could have housed them or supported them there. So there's a lot of discussions on that happening. And with regards to the UK, yes, it's a threat to our economy because they cost money. And a lot of people, hard working all their life, can barely get benefits. And then they see these people come in, get given food, hotels, paid, and there's resentment there. But there's the balance to it. These people are displaced. These people, if we're in a situation, if the UK had a major problem tomorrow, we thought France was the better place to be, we'd all go across the ocean. It's
Yeah, but
human
we
nature.
wouldn't necessarily just be men of fighting age going across. I mean,
Correct.
what would we do with the women and the children? We just leave them and just, these people who are coming in, particularly on the rubber boats that nobody seems to be able to stop, are men of certain fighting age, which has started to create some debate about why they're here. And let's be honest, if the government is able to, and has done, and we've seen it, lock people up in their houses for several months and say you can't go out and your business has to shut, and if you happen to go down to the seafront and sit on a park bench and have a cup of coffee, you will be and has been arrested and fined. If the powers of the government can do that, why the hell can they not turn around boats of people who are costing us, as all the things you just said, costing us a fortune, causing resentment, and bringing in challenges to our way of life?
Okay, again, a few points. I still want to go back to something in your previous question, but the reason that these men are fighting age is one, because they're more likely to survive the crossing and strong enough to get here. Two, they know we're a very compassionate country, and if they get established, they can send for the kids and parents and the grandmothers later. So it's a strategic situation, I think. There, I'm concerned on many other points, but I'll come back to our solution for this, our good immigration. But one point I did want to bring, again from the States, the Mexican border, there's a lot of immigrants crossing there, but they're a different threat because every single person that crosses from Mexico into the United States has the most powerful weapon in the USA, and that is a vote. And that's why the Democrats at the moment want as many that come through and say, come and we'll help you, because that's more votes for them and they'll stay in power longer. So these immigrants are weapons as well as problems in the States, for example. So from our perspective, our vision of good immigration, before I get there, I have to explain one of our key fundamental principles of Nonpol. We want to make a 24/7 society. At the moment, the internet is 24/7. You can get onto your bank account online 24/7. Hospitals are 24/7. Police, fire, ambulance are 24/7. Shops are staying open nearly 24/7. I mean, there's a library in Newcastle that's open 24 hours. We're nearly there. I would like a 24/7 society because one, we'd get more balance of payments, more GDP. Two, we could probably go to a 4-day week, give us 3 days of leisure. which we could then invest in entertainment, the arts and creativity and sports. And we could probably have a higher national minimum wage if we ran 24/7. But we don't have the workforce to run 24/7 at the moment. And again, it's not anything you can do overnight. So we need good immigration. In the same way, Australia, if you go to Australia, there's a point system. If they need doctors and you got doctors, you get high points. You can go to Australia. Fortunately, there's no language or cultural difference there. But over the years, Australia has used good immigration to help the growth of their country. So what I'd like to do with the UK effectively is say, yes, we want immigration. However, dear Mr. Immigrant, if you want to come and have a better life in the UK, you have got to learn English to a good standard. You've got to learn a trade. You've got to accept the British culture and way of life. And not only that, we will teach you all that. I would like to make the equivalent of university campuses. I was at Kent University recently on a seminar, and the campus is spectacular. The ability to teach anything and everything, and the facilities. So I would have like a university campus, I'll probably start off with one, where the immigrants can come, so we can feed them, we can house them, we can clothe them, make sure they learn good English. If they're a doctor, we'll bring them into the English way of being a doctor or a nurse, and we'd give them a trade, and in return, we would give them a national health number, national insurance number. They'd obviously get national health service. We'd give them a home, and we'd put them in society, because by the time they were ready to come into the British society, they'd be speaking English, they'd have a good understanding of our culture, and they'd have a good career. But here's the big thing. All that cost of us taking them from coming in on the boat to finally putting them out there as a useful person in our society is a cost to the country, and they will pay it back like a student loan. So all that cost of training them, feeding them, and giving them clothes, keeping them warm, that is a cost per night. And there's a cost of the education. And at the end of the day, when they finally get there, they would have a bill like a student loan, 30, 40, 50, 60,000 pounds, and either through their tax code or through a student loan, they would pay that back. So effectively, immigration would pay for itself, and it gives us a good, solid workforce that we need to go 24/7. So that's our kind of vision of good immigration.
Right. Okay. But the question I asked is, what are you going to do about the people who are coming over who don't fit the category that you just described? They're coming over. They don't seem to be educated. They seem to be people who are not doctors. They're not nurses. They don't necessarily speak the language. They've deliberately thrown away their documents and their telephones so they can't be identified. Some have pretended to be underage, and clearly they're not. And they're sitting in camps doing goodness knows what, costing us a fortune, with company like Serco not letting you go anywhere near them and asking any questions, or even understanding the reason that they're here, or finding out more about them. This is what people are worried about. And you can see loads of videos on the internet where people have gone up to these things and they've been told to keep away. The security are doing a very good job of it. But what would you do to prevent them? Because time after time, the government says we're doing our best to stop it. And it seems to me that they've actually been invited to come, and the government is lying about it. That's the appearance to me, just my opinion, may be wrong, but it does seem to be that they have been actually invited and encouraged to come over. So I still want to know, how would you stop them?
Okay. Obviously, that's a very complex and difficult situation. And to me, any time you've got a problem, you have to go to the source. I think somebody said, the bath's overflowing. You don't spend your time mopping up the water, you turn the tap off. So the first thing we have to do is turn the tap off. We can address the full bath later. So we've got to turn the tap off. So we need to stop them. And there's obviously humanitarian aid. You can't shoot them. You can't burst their boats and let them drown. So you've got to do it in a humanitarian way. So what I would do at the moment, we have a lot of military. We have a lot of boats, and possibly in countries doing stuff that's costing us time and money. I would actually monitor our shores. We know where they're coming from. Obviously, we don't need to look at the west coast, maybe the south, but most of it's the east coast. And I would get any immigrants coming through. I'd take them off their dinghies. I'd put them on our either military boats or coast guard boats or an interim service where we use this and take them back to France. And I'd even say to the French government, we are bringing them back. They've left your shore. Under international treaties, they're technically an immigrant of your country. You are responsible for them. And I would take them back peacefully and put them on the side. But what I'd do next, while they're on the boat or before I put them back on French soil, I would take a biometric. I think they're looking at this now. And I'd say to these people, say, look, guys, you've done this illegally. That's not the way Britain do immigration. We've got a good way to do it. And here's how we do it. And if you like that, we'll look at it. And if you're prepared to do all that, we'll consider you. But if you're not, we've got your biometric. And if you come in again, we'll make sure you never, ever have a chance to immigrate to the UK. But there is a route there if you do it through correct channels. We'd have to liaise with the French government. We'd have to get the infrastructure to get all these boats out. I'd call back as much military that are out doing exercises or training just to do this because we almost have a national emergency situation. And in national emergencies, you can call on the military. And I'd get them to do this because once they see that we do that, they won't try as hard. They'll realize, oh dear, the door's closed for England. They've turned the tap off. Let's do it. So we'd have to do a major operation in an emergency situation.
Curious that we're not doing that already. I mean, you know, you've come up with a solution. It's curious that the intelligent people in the government at this moment are actually not doing it, especially as we've got an election coming up. You would think that some of these measures they would be trying to do so that at least people saw something was happening. So,
There's
but
no
thank
money in
you.
it. There's no
Well,
money.
there may be no money in it, but they're quite happy to fleece money from us left, right, and centre.
Exactly. It doesn't play the political narrative. In
Right.
fact,
Okay.
yeah.
I want to move on to
So,
as you know, these are very political situations for a non-political party, but you can see that if you're going into politics to run a country, you've got to deal with these policies, I suppose. One thing that vexes my audience is education, the education system. Now, the other day I had David Edelman on, who says, and I tend to agree with him, that school is no place for children. That the school is miseducating children. We have seen a plethora of policies which seems to be more about sexualizing children and getting them ready for paedophiles than we've ever seen before or should ever be in, but that keeping children in a classroom as very good workers of the state, keeping them down, telling them what they have a very tight curriculum, not expanding their mind, not having debates about things, not letting children, you know, even controlling them if they have a biological need to empty their bladder, they still have to seek permission to do, you know, some of the basic things. And of course, you mentioned biometrics, using biometrics to pay for things like dinner and the tuck shop, if they still have a tuck shop these days. What would you do? How does the education system work under non-poll?
okay, great. Surprise, surprise, Nonpol has an education policy. But just going back to the biometrics, we're also a party of technology. Biometrics are efficient, good, and stop fraud and people impersonating each other. And it's the future, whether we like it or not. And I think it's a use. I'm only into fingerprint biometrics. I'm not into facial or voice because of AI and cloning and deepfake and the ability for large corporates to have my face as a digital representation. I am against. But a fingerprint, I think, is simple, easy, and we've been using it on iPhones for the last 5 to 10 years, and it works very well. So I think there is a room for it. It needs to be at the right level. With regards to education, I agree with a lot of what you say, and we want to really revamp education. And there's some very key principles we have. We want teachers to only teach. And that's all they do. They don't do marking. They don't do all the admin stuff. They don't have to go home and do all that precious stuff at night and look at Johnny's scoring writing and dislike this guy because he's been given. No, we don't. They are teachers. They teach. But they now have to have two disciplines. So they have their key core discipline, their academic discipline. Because we want to split the school up. We want to make it an 8 till 6 day. So the kids can come in the morning, we will give them breakfast, the parents can go and have a career, have a job, we'll look after them, pastoral services to make sure everyone has the benefit. And again, they'll work till 5, but our day is split up into two parts. And in the morning is only the academic area. And in the afternoon, after we've given free lunch and nutrition, they do creative activities, things that are not mental. So if they want sports, if they want to dance, if they want to play golf, anything that we need to identify the talent in this country early on. If they're good at athletics, if they want to be a pop star, if they want to be a games wizard and play in these huge tournaments for games, those are new careers. People would be able to choose in the afternoon what they would like to do within reason. If they want to be an astronaut, they probably couldn't do that for them. But generally, we would it be purely activity. So they actually look forward and think, oh, this afternoon I'm out playing tennis or I'm out doing this. So they want to be there. When I was at school, I used to stay till 10 o'clock at night because there were so many activities I could get involved in. It was brilliant. So I'd like to do that. I see
So
you've got a
can
question.
I
Yes.
just going to because we're running out of time and there's
Oh, right.
so many questions that one
Yeah.
could ask about. The thing that worried me in all of that, and I think you're coming from a good place, and I'm not arguing that, but the thing that worried me is that you are taking children away from their mums and dads, and you're saying let them have a career. The thing that seems to me, having brought up children of my own, my sister home educated, my girlfriend is now home educating and got them out of school. One of the benefits is that she spends time, or the mum or dad spends time with their children to fashion them in the way they want to, not how a school, whatever its policy is, whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, is. And if you take them out for a huge amount of time, the bonding and the confusion about who your mum or dad is. I don't like to use the word parent these days because in the corporate world that we're in, parent means the pair that rent their children. But we won't get into that. But that is, that's what's going on. But the mums and dads do not have enough time and influence with their children. And I'm not saying that's easy, because there's probably a lot of mums and dads that want to get rid of the kids so that they can do their thing. But the mums and dads were responsible for bringing the child into existence and need, I think, to take more responsibility. And it just seems that a school that takes away that responsibility and is doing the parental things that you mentioned is somewhat worrying.
Okay.
Would children be able to not go to school if they, if somebody just said, I don't want to go in today?
Okay. So let's talk about that. Some very valid and modern points there. I totally agree. However, not every home is nice. There's a lot of toxic homes out there. And there's a lot of kids that either get abused or don't get a chance or don't get an opportunity. And we believe everybody should be the best person they can be. They should have the opportunities. In addition to that, a lot of parents work during the day. So 9 till 5, most parents aren't there anyway. And we'd have it so when the child leaves school at 5 or whenever, there is no homework, there's nothing else, they go back. But more importantly, because they've had a good day at school and they've enjoyed it, they go back home happy. And their parents then get the benefit of a happy, balanced child who understands the virtues and values of life and has respect. Kids today, I've seen, have little respect. It's our duty up to the age of 16 to help our children grow up to be good people for our society. And not all parents are good. Even the rich parents who don't have problems spoil their kids. There is so much dysfunctionality at home that every child needs to have an opportunity. And also, being in school, you learn social dynamics, you learn group dynamics, you learn respect, you learn a lot more about individuals, and you build the friendships for life.
Yeah, no,
So
I have no doubt that there will be plenty of parents who would be quite happy with sending their kids. I'm just thinking, have people got the choice
yes,
to be able to say, do you know what, we want to home educate, and we need help to
okay,
do this because at the moment, yes, there are groups and what have you, but it is very difficult, and there seems to be a lot of rules and regulations to, to encourage kids to go into the state system and end up as slaves of the state rather than free thinking, critical thinking kids who can decide what they want to do with their lives.
okay, and I've got experience of that. Both my daughters went to a performing arts school, and they're both performing artists now. And that school had an intake every year of 300 pupils. But the amount of people who applied for it was between 800 and 2,000, and they had to pick 300 because the school had a great reputation. The kids loved it, and the ones that came out were great kids. And I'd like to build a model school with, I mean, we haven't touched on a lot of things. In the academic area, I wouldn't be doing any of the dead subjects like history and geology. I'd teach them about the internet. I'd teach them about the ability to discuss. I'd explain how economics work, how a bank account works, how when you leave, you can go straight into life and know everything and be independent. So my whole academic curriculum in the morning would be more towards how to make a person survive in life. But obviously, need maths and English and a few other key things, a bit of science, but most of it would be how to be good in the current UK culture. But if I build these model schools, the kids don't have to go there. They can choose the normal ones out there, or they can have home tutoring, or they can play truant, or they can cause mischief out on the streets. But if I make these schools so attractive and the results are so good, they're going to be knocking the door. I want to go there. My mate goes there, and he's doing this, that, and the other. I want to incentivize. I want to give people a chance. I want good schooling because you can't do. I can't change the education system overnight. I've got to build one or two model schools. And the first thing I'm going to have a problem with is the unions. They say, oh, teachers can't do this. Because I don't want teachers to have 7 week holidays. That was only there because the children went out, did the fruit harvest years and years and years ago. And it's just stayed there because nobody can change it. And the teachers love the holidays. I want a teacher to be professional. I want them to have 30 days holiday like other white collar workers. But I also want to pay them a very good wage. But I don't want to pay them a wage. I want them to be a consultant so they get a day rate. So if we get a bad teacher, we don't have to live with them for 30 years while they're there in position and dead wood. There's competition. And while they're under contract, the union can't come in and say, oh, you can't do that. I'll have my model school contract teachers where professional people get a good wage, do a good job. And people say, I like that model. I want my child to go there. Or the teacher says, I want to work there. That's a lot more interesting. And eventually people say, yeah, we want one of those model schools in our area. And hopefully the incentives and the whole program will automatically, by osmosis, take over the system. But if you want to do your homeschooling, fine. As long as we have touch points that we know that you are doing that, that you can go through certain appraisals with Zoom and online. We can send.
Why would you? I have to just jump in there.
Yes, sir.
Why would you want to know? Why would the state, because you would effectively now be the state, why would the state want to have any influence or knowledge of what people are doing at home if
Not
that's their choice?
influence isn't the word. I'd
Okay.
like, let's say, for example, 10% of the country wanted homeschooling. How would we know if that's working? How would we
Why
know?
should you know?
Because at the end of the day, those children could either be abused, they could be in a toxic environment, they could come out as having no qualification, not even speaking the language, especially if their parents have an old immigration where they keep their own language and traditions. That's no help to the British economy. We don't want to control them. We'll give them the options, but at the same time,
Why should it be? You see, why? There's so many questions, and
yeah,
we're really running out of time. But
okay.
why should it be a question of whether they have help to the British economy? Why should that be a thing? If people are living a life for themselves, why should they care a hoot whether it suits the wider public and the government? Why should they?
It doesn't, because if somebody decides they want to be a traveller for the rest of their life and all that, that's all they're going to do, and that's their lifestyle choice. That's fine. But we need to understand that. We need to know that because the taxpayer may be paying for them. They may be doing illegal activities. They don't have a national insurance number. There's cash in hand. There's fraud. There's benefit fraud. There's a lot of
What's wrong with cash in hand?
cash in hand is effectively leads to fraud.
Wh-
And if I'm working,
Why does that? How do I understand that? Because I mean, I can turn up. If I used to do it as a children's entertainer at some point in my life. Yes, I mean, God, I wouldn't want to do it now. But I used to do that, and I would turn up, and someone would say, "Thanks ever so much, Richard. You've entertained my children. Here's 30 quid," and it was like in cash. Nobody need know. The government doesn't need to know. Why should they? I've earned the money, and I then probably go and spend that money in petrol on the way home, and a bar of chocolate, and some food, and what have you. You know, back in those days, 30 quid was quite a bit of money. But why should anybody know?
okay, going back
Why
to
is
your,
that fraud? That's not fraudulent, is it? They
no,
paid me for a service.
it's fraud when an unscrupulous contractor brings people in, pays them cash in hand, doesn't have to pay any taxes, doesn't have to look after their welfare, doesn't care about them, puts them in, stack them hundreds in a room in a hotel for them to go and pick mussels on the coast in the season. That leads to human abuse. That leads to human rights. That leads to fraud because that money isn't controlled anywhere, and those people then put the money potentially into criminal
Yeah,
enterprises.
well, exactly. So you've got two different scenarios there. That somewhere in the middle, there's got to be the answer. But surely some people can earn cash in hand without having.
Cash is okay if it's, for example, you're £30 as an entertainer.
Mm,
If you did that 1,000 times a year, you'd earn 30,000. Well, you wouldn't be 1,000. It's only 365 days. You wouldn't do it 3 times a day. So you might earn 10,000 a year doing that.
but you might do two or three of those shows a day. You
And,
could
and,
do.
and you wouldn't be taxed because you're well under the tax threshold. That £30 is your money. You're doing it. It isn't a problem. All I'm saying is, Richard, tell us that. Do your self-assessment. I've been self-employed for 30 years of my life. I do a self-assessment and I report the money I earn. And if you didn't report one of them, it's not a huge crime. But the concept is we have an economy that we need to understand. And I don't like to use the word control, but we need to pay for all our initiatives. We need GDP, uh, gross domestic product figures. We need growth. We need to manage inflation. We need taxes to be able to pay for our schools and our police and our military. We need to be able to do that. And if somebody else is working their butt off in the next house and they are paying tax and paying all the national insurance, the person next door is getting cash in hand, claiming benefits, getting loads of freebies, but they're all okay because they're getting loads of cash. Nobody knows about it. They've got the nice phone, the nice TV, but they're getting £200 a week off the government. The person next door is paying taxpayers' money on. I don't think people would be happy. Control is the wrong word. I just want to give people the opportunity. If you
Mm.
choose cash in hand is your industry, and a lot of people do, that's fine. But let's just be all above board.
Right. Okay. So we've got to bring this to a close, and there's a million other questions that I know that
we
I would
can
like to
we
ask.
can have another one, Richard. I've really
Uh,
enjoyed this. This has been great fun.
I hope the questions haven't been too difficult.
No.
What strikes me is it's interesting because how do you go as a non-political party into an extremely political business in which you effectively outline policies which would have to be administered by people who would administer those policies, who would be politicians, and so therefore you are in politics, even though you call yourself non-poll. You
Yeah.
see, this is whereas if let's say I was not wanting to be in politics, I would be effectively saying, look, the choice is yours, mate. Do what you like. Be self-rule. The old version of anarchy. The thing of do no harm. That's the only rule we've got. Effectively, don't steal. Don't you could take the Ten Commandments if you like, pretty much, and just say, look, as long as you're not being a nuisance, you can get on with it.
That's almost survival in the jungle. You're the strongest survive. If I'm bigger than the person next door, I can bully them, take what I want, steal their land. That's been happening for time immemorial. We're
But
more
the
civilized
politicians
nowadays.
seem to be doing that anyway. The
Okay,
politicians, the crown, they're all doing that. They're all who owns the land? The man who's got the biggest force.
yeah. Going back to your point, it is an oxymoron to say I want to be non-political in a political environment. I have no choice in that. The rules are there now, but I would never be able to change them if I don't get into the game. And I go back to one of the opening points. We want to do politics with with a small p, which is the science of managing a country or a government for the people, and not the capital P, the corrupt politicians that use and abuse that we all dislike today. So it's politics in a way, but not politics as we know, Jim.
Great. It's nonpol.com. Do go and check it out. Have a look. There are the 12 principles, which we were hoping to get through, but then I had so many other questions. So, I had to sort of ask and challenge. Normally, I don't ask and challenge and get riled, but when it comes to this sort of thing, and I think it's important. You may have had your own questions. I'd be interested to know what they were. Bung them in the comments. Let's see your observations. It'll be fascinating. But Neil O'Neill, thank you so much for describing the system. We may well have to, as we get closer to a general election, have you got candidates out there that you're fielding at the moment?
We are seeking them. I mean, we've only been a political party since June this year, so we're very new. We're looking ideally candidates in every constituency because, as you said, if I want to be prime minister, I have to have a majority. Highly unlikely. It's total pipe dream, but we can give it a go. The more candidates we get, if people in the country like what Nonpol stands for, where the current state of unrest and the parties available at the moment, I think we have a really good time in history to try and make a difference.
So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see if we can make a difference one way or another. We've got to do something because we cannot have what we have at the moment any longer. So Neil O'Neill, thank you so much for joining me. I will be back with more guests and more monologues on the channel. Don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe. But until then, from Neil and I, thank you for watching. And until next time, goodbye.
Thank you, Richard.